All right. Hi there, D3. My name is Corey Berg, and I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I am here, as always, with my friend Katie Mucci, and she tells me that all of these slides and the recording will very soon be posted to the D3 webinar page on nca.org. I've also got a very special guest with me today. Jeff Myers is hiding out in the Q&A function. So if you have any questions about what you hear, if you want to hear about how the Steelers season is going, or if you just want to say hi to Jeff, you can find him by hitting that Q&A button in the upper right corner of your screen. But I am back this December. We met in October for some non-controversials, but we are going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about 2025 convention proposals. So here we go. Our goals for our time together are on this slide. We're going to continue that convention prep that we started back in October, and we're going to talk about where you can find all of the resources that you need to get your hands on between now and Nashville. Then we're going to talk about how to actually read a proposal, and then remind ourselves about how things will go down during the business session when we all get together. The bulk of our time is going to be spent on the proposals themselves. And of course, I will do my best to save time for questions. And then finally, I've got a couple of AMA-ish updates for you that have nothing to do with the proposals. But we're going to start with our resources. So here are the two biggies that I really recommend you find before we all come to convention here in a couple weeks. The official notice that you see there on the left is something that we started to talk about in October when we were talking about all of the blue pages stuff. So things like the non-controversial and the emergency legislation that you're going to be asked to ratify in January. And that official notice has all 6 of the proposals that you're going to be asked to vote on at that same time and that we're going to talk about today. Accompanying the official notice is the proposal question and answer document. Each year, staff works with the sponsors of the proposals and the Interpretations and Legislation Committee to whip up this resource. And it outlines what each proposal would change and how it would be applied if it's ultimately adopted by the membership. Both of these resources, if they're not up there now, they will be very, very soon on both of the links that are on these slides, the legislative actions and issues page and the 2025 convention resources page on nca.org. When you check out a proposal in the official notice, or if you look it up in LSDBI, it can get overwhelming pretty quickly because you're going to see a lot of information in the same place. So whether you are newer to compliance or you're a seasoned vet, I thought we spend a minute or two on this slide just to review all of the things that you're going to see as you're forming your opinion on these 6 proposals. Starting with the intent. The intent is what the proposal is trying to change or fix, or in some cases, remove entirely. Next, you'll see the text of the actual proposal, and this is where things can get a little overwhelming. You're going to see a lot of language in a lot of different forms. So if there is something that is currently in the manual and it is going to stay if that proposal is adopted, you're going to see it in normal font. If something is going to be removed that's currently in the manual, you're going to see it in a strike through. And then if something will be completely new or added in if the proposal is adopted, you're going to see that bold and underlined. Next, you'll see the source. So this is who, whether it be a group of institutions, a handful of conferences in the membership, or a committee or council in the governance structure, the source is who thinks this is a good idea, who's putting this proposal forward. The effective date, hopefully, is self-explanatory. That is, if the proposal is adopted, when does it officially become a rule in Division 3? And then the final thing that you're going to see is the rationale. So why do the proposal sponsors or sponsors think that this is a good idea? Why do they think Division III needs to move in this direction? And one last kind of housekeeping item before we get into the proposals themselves is what actually happens on Friday morning. And that's the first important thing to note is Friday. Those of you that have been to convention before know that traditionally the issues forum is on Friday, and the business session where all the voting goes down is Saturday. That's different this year. It actually has moved up a date. So our issues forum will be on Thursday, and all the voting will take place on Friday. And if you have never been there before, or you need a reminder, when you wonder, hey, what should that voting tally kind of get near? What kind of number should I look for? Remember that every active Division III institution, every active multi-sport conference, and national SAC gets a vote on each proposal. So if you add those three numbers together, that'll kind of be the ballpark that we're looking for on each proposal. If that proposal is adopted, so the majority of those votes are in favor of the idea, the proposal will change the legislation as of the effective date that is listed. If the majority of votes do not support the proposal and the proposal is defeated, then we will stick with the existing legislation on the books. No changes will be made in the manual. We are now going to start getting into the proposals, starting with the presidential grouping. There are 3 proposals in this group, and the presidential grouping is just kind of a fancy name for proposals that have widespread or would have widespread impact in Division III, a big impact on the membership, and really the things that the membership will vote on that presidents and chancellors should really be clued into and paying attention to pretty closely. The first is Proposal 2025-1. It has to do with the composition of the National Student Athlete Advisory Committee. So currently, National SAC operates with a partner structure where every multi-sport conference and the group of independent institutions, of which there are 2, have a partner with which they alternate in 3-year terms as a primary member of National SAC. Primary members attend all 4 annual SAC meetings. So that is convention in January, April, July in Indy, and November. The partner in that group, or the associate member, only attend the January meeting at convention and the July meeting in Indy each year. If adopted, this proposal, which was sponsored by the American Rivers and the Great Northeast Athletic Conferences, would get rid of that partner structure that we currently have, and instead it would have every multi-sport conference and the group of independents with a seat on National SAC at the same time. So if you use the current number of D3 conferences and remember the independents, that would effectively double the size of the committee from 21 to 42 student athletes at a time. Next is Proposal 2025-2. It looks to adjust the minimum size required for multi-sport conferences. So currently, in order to create or to maintain active Division III membership, a multi-sport conference has to consist of at least 7 institutions. If adopted, this proposal, which was initially sponsored by the Upper Midwest Athletic Conference and then supported by the Coast to Coast and the North Coast Athletic Conference, would decrease that minimum number from 7 to 6 in order to align that minimum standard with the standards for a single sport conference and for an AQ status to a D3 championship. The final proposal in the presidential grouping is 2025-3. It has to do with the Division III legislative process. And what you see here on this slide is the start to finish process that D3 uses currently to move ideas through to eventually end up at a vote at convention each year. I know the text is really small, and don't worry about that yet because we're going to talk about some of the more specific stuff on the next slide. but I put this screenshot up here to basically show you visually that things are pretty chill between January and July. You know, you might be having conversations on the campus or the conference level. The governance structure is doing its thing, talking about ideas that should maybe move forward, but nothing really gets up and rolling until that July 15th date that's there on the middle of the slide. At that point, for the rest of the summer and for all of the fall, that's when this process is really active and happening. We are drafting things, we are publishing things, we're letting you know mid-November with the official notice, all of the things that you're going to have to talk about in January. Proposal 3, which is our first governance sponsored proposal, it started with the Interpretations and Legislation Committee, or ILC, made its way up through Management Council, and then ultimately President's Council signed on to sponsor this proposal. It is a package of concepts to amend different parts of what you just saw on the previous slide. There are 6 concepts in total, and things are about to get real animated, so bear with me. The first concept in this package would create a new proposal submission deadline, moving the current date of July 15th up to July 1st. It would also adjust what's required at that time of submission. So right now, if you submit a proposal, we ask it to come in final legislative format, or as close to final legislative format as you can get it. This concept, in addition to moving July 15th to July 1st, it would say, nope, we don't need final legislative format at this time. We're just going to need you to give us the intent statement, the rationale for the proposal, and then give us a list of the bylaws that would be affected by the proposal. Concept 2 would create a comment period, Currently, we don't have one of those. So the membership has to wait till later in the process when staff publishes what's in the cycle at any given time. The comment period, if this proposal is adopted, would take place as soon after July 1st as possible, and it would run through September 1st. And it would give the membership the opportunity to publicly offer feedback on every idea that's initially submitted. So it would be posted publicly, and you could take that time to offer, this is great, or change this, tweak that. All of that feedback would then be given to the proposal sponsors, and then they could take that sort of commentary into consideration and decide if they were to make any changes to their proposals to move forward. Ultimately, that could result in stronger proposals that have more membership support earlier on in the process. Concept number 3 in this proposal would create an additional and an alternate submission deadline. So right now, July 15th is your only option. You either get that proposal idea in by July 15th, or you have to hold off a whole other year. This concept would give you another shot or another opportunity to submit that proposal. A couple of really important things to note if this proposal were to be adopted and you were to submit something by this alternate date. First, you would have to come with more sponsorship or more support when you submit the idea. So instead of just having 20 institutions or 2 full conferences, a proposal submitted by this alternate date would have to come from at least 20 institutions across 4 conferences, or by 4 full conferences in order to move forward. The second thing that's important to note is you would have to submit things in final legislative format, so kind of like you do now. And then the third thing is, if you were to choose this later submission date, you wouldn't get the benefit of that comment period that I talked about just a second ago. Concept 4, this concept not too involved. It would just create a consistent submission date for all proposals. So everything that was submitted by July 1st would have to be fully sponsored by this date. Governance ideas would have to be recommended by the appropriate committee or council by that point. And the things that were submitted by September 15th would have to be finalized and at their full sponsorship threshold. Concept number 5. Currently, the membership gets an update about what's in the cycle through 2 publications of proposed legislation, or POPLs. But with the comment period that concept 2 would create, multiple POPLs would no longer be needed, because the comment period, once things get posted, you would know what's in the cycle. So what concept 5 would do is everything that is properly submitted, properly sponsored, would just have a single publication before the official notice, and that would be October 1st annually. And then the final concept, concept 6 for this proposal, it has to do with who can submit amendment to amendments that would increase the modification of a proposal. Hopefully, this sounds a little bit familiar to you, because back in January of this year, the membership adopted Proposal 2024-2, which actually created this list in the first place and said that the original sponsors of a proposal can offer amendments that increase the modification all the way up to November 1st. Previously, that wasn't possible. What this concept would do is it would add some more groups who would be able to do that. Specifically, 4 multi-sport conferences could do it, at least 20 schools from 4 conferences, or management or president's council if 3/4 of that body was on board. So it's just adding to that list that was created last January. One last thing before I stop quickly for some questions is, if you have been tracking the POPLs this cycle, you have probably, I can speak, noticed that something was missing from the official notice. And that is what this slide is about, the not proposal 2025-4. Earlier this fall, there was a post-bac eligibility proposal that was making its way through the legislative cycle. It was governance sponsored, but when President's Council took a final review of it in October, it decided not to move the proposal forward to a vote. Instead, it put the proposal back into the governance structure, referred it back to the committee structure. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the committees, the councils, and then you all as a general membership to give feedback over the coming months. So stay tuned. Jeff or Katie, how is the Q&A looking right now? Or should I head right into the general grouping?
It is empty right now, Corey.
I love to hear it. Thanks, Jeff. All right, we're going to head into our final 3 proposals, starting with the real and official 2025-4. This deals with Division 3's federated rules process. So what you're going to see on this slide is a screenshot of a super helpful 1-pager that we have. It's also linked in the Q&A document. So when you get your hands on that, you'll have access to this 1-pager. What you see on the left is the association-wide Playing Rules Oversight Panel, or PROP, process. The one where representatives from all 3 divisions get together and they propose and review and sometimes adopt playing rules for specific sports. What you see on the right side of the slide is the Division 3 federated process, and that is something that's overseen by Management Council. It is how D3 has the opportunity to get feedback on and review things that are working their way through the PROP process. So if Division 3 determines rules should be federated, aka just for us in Division 3, or if they should be common across all 3 divisions, that's what the federated process helps sort out. What is important to know is that the D3 process on the right fits within the overall PROP process on the left. And Management Council even recently recommended the creation of a subcommittee to help things along with the D3 specific process. Proposal 4 which was initially submitted by the North Coast and then co-sponsored by a handful of conferences that you can see there on the slide, would keep both the current prop process and the current Division III federated process in place. So while it wouldn't change anything about the existing processes, it would create an extra opportunity on the back end for Management Council to consider exempting Division III from certain rules if the council felt like there was either a philosophical or a financial impact to D3. And that decision, if it was made, would come once a rule had been approved by prop, but before it actually went into effect for the 3 divisions. Also important to know is that this proposal has checks and balances built in. So if Management Council were to act in this way, if it were to move to exempt Division III from a rule, the full Division III membership would have the chance to ratify that decision at the next convention, much like you do for non-controversial or emergency legislation right now. Moving on to proposal 2025-5. This concerns the current reclassifying membership process, which is when an institution in D1 or D2 realizes that the grass is greener in Division III and wants to join us in our division. Right now, if everything goes smoothly with required event attendance and report submission, that process takes 3 years. And the Division III membership committee serves as the gatekeeper to that process. So they determine whether schools move forward. This governance sponsored proposal, which was initially conceived by the membership committee and then ultimately sponsored by Management Council, would provide an opportunity for those reclassifying schools to apply for a waiver of the 3rd year of the process. It wouldn't change anything about the requirements that those schools have to meet. Instead, they would just have to show the membership committee that they were able to meet all of those conditions and meet those requirements of the membership process earlier on an expedited timeline. Again, the membership committee would be in the driver's seat here, so it would review the waiver application as it reviews all reporting right now. And ultimately, it would decide if it's appropriate to allow that reclassifying institution to become a D3 member after year 2. And then our final proposal is 2025-6 for women's wrestling. Women's wrestling has been on the emerging sports for women list since 2023. And I think we can all agree that it's seen some pretty incredible growth in that time, not only in Division III, but across all 3 divisions. Emerging sports are required to follow Division III rules ever since they were put on the list. And your institution, if it sponsors women's wrestling, may use it to meet your bylaw 20 sports sponsorship minimums. This governance sponsored proposal originated with the Committee on Women's Athletics, or CWA, and then it was supported by Management Council. If it is adopted, not only by us in Division III, but by all 3 divisions, then a national collegiate championship and a sports committee would be created for women's wrestling. The goal for the committee would be to start the work immediately to get people from the membership serving on that group. And the first championship hopefully would take place in winter of 2026. Jeff, I know we've got 6 minutes left. Anything in the Q&A, or should I go to my other updates?
I think you can go to other updates, Corey.
All right, here we go. They'll be quick. The first one, hopefully, is some good news. If you haven't heard it already from staff or you haven't stumbled upon it yourself, it has to do with our online start date calculator for fall sports. It is up and running for fall 25. So if you like to have the computer do the work for you, feel free to check this out, plug in the sport that you're wondering about, the earliest start date, and then the calculator will spit it out for you. If you'd like to check your work, we've got a bylaw for that. It's 1702-12-2, I want to say. If you notice anything funky with the calculator, just reach out to staff and we'll contact our friends in IT who will fix any bugs that we might encounter. The last thing I wanted to put here on the slide is part informational, part preview. The part informational is, if you haven't heard already, August 1st launched this online platform called NIL Assist. This is kind of the fulfillment of the promise of the NIL legislation in bylaw 22 for Division 3, right? So it promised two things. Hey, we're going to give D3 student athletes who are out there doing their thing with NIL opportunities, we're going to give them a service provider registry. So as they work with brand experts or tax people or attorneys or any of the above, they can have access to this system and say, this person was awesome, or never work with this person again. And they have the ability to rate those service providers to help more student athletes be more informed and to make the most out of their opportunities. The second thing that it fulfills is the promise of providing student athlete education. So this NIL Assist platform, you can see it there on the slide, has an entire tab devoted to education. And there are a ton of modules up there from tax prep people, from attorneys, from student athletes who are out there being really successful, to give information on how to be great and how to really maximize your NIL potential if that's something you wanted to do. And then one of the cool things that wasn't promised by the legislation, but it's just kind of a bonus of this platform, is that box there on the far right, the data dashboard. It is a place where you can go if you're curious, or where your student athletes can go to see aggregated NIL data. So to say, hey, I am a volleyball student athlete and I want to do an NIL opportunity that's going to require me to post on Instagram. And you can get an idea of what student athletes are out there doing and what they're earning for different NIL opportunities. The one thing I will say there is, because Division 3 doesn't have mandatory reporting, the data in that data dashboard is D1 focused, but it is still a good jumping off point if you or if student athletes are doing any research on what market value for their name, image, or likeness might look like. That was the informational part. The preview part of having this slide in here is that at Issues Forum in Nashville, we're going to talk more about NIL. Like, where is D3 right now? We're going to talk about this NIL Assist platform. So I wanted to make sure that you all know that it's out there, that you know how to find it, nilassist.ncaa.org. That way you can come to the Issues Forum in a couple weeks, having seen it, hopefully familiarized yourself with the platform. And then that way we can have a really kind of robust and informed discussion about it, or what we want to change about it, or just generally where D3 should be in this NIL space. And that is the end. All of my slides. I see one thing in the Q&A, Jeff, but I don't know if it's a question or if someone's just asking you who the Steelers are playing this weekend.
Yeah, not a question, Corey.
Okay.
I do see one question actually that came in, Corey, about women's wrestling.
Sure. Yeah.
They asked, is it safe to assume that Division 1 and Division 2 programs that sponsor women's wrestling can offer athletic aid, even if D3 members cannot and have a lot of the teams?
Yeah, so having a national collegiate championship would have Division 3 student athletes who are not permitted to be on athletically related financial aid competing in that championship against wrestling student athletes from D1 and D2 institutions who may potentially be on aid. That wouldn't be unique to women's wrestling. Other national collegiate sports operate under the same model.
Perfect. And one more question on women's wrestling. What is the number per division that would be needed to break off into potentially a divisional championship instead of national collegiate?
Yeah, I want to say that it's 40. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong on there.
Yeah, For Division III, it would be 40 to break off and have their own Division III championship. So you're correct, Corey.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
That's the only one I saw in there.
All right. Awesome. So I appreciate everyone's time. If you have any other questions about anything you heard today, Jay Myers at NCAA.org, just joking, reach out to staff, send questions into RSRO. We will get them answered. You will also see me again at Issues Forum. And so I look forward to seeing everyone in a couple weeks. Have a great holiday season and safe travels to Nashville. Thanks, everyone.